Today on Stitching with Cibarella, we are going to go through how you read a pattern. The pattern we're going to look at today is from Wild Violet Cross Stitch, and it is actually a pattern that she made for our Reddit Stitch Along. You can pick it up on Gumroad. I will post a link in the description. But we're going to go through and I'm going to show you how you read a pattern. It's one of the biggest questions we get on the cross stitch subreddit, and I think that we should go through and read one together. Now, for the most part, your pattern is going to be the same. It will always include the actual pattern, what your piece is that you're stitching. It will always include a color code. Some patterns will be a little bit different in the fact that they will include how to cross stitch instructions sometimes. Some will include finishing instructions. Some will include the length of floss that you're going to need, those numbers, so that you have information on how many skeins you will need to buy. Some will include just a cover page like this that shows you what the piece will look like, who made it, information like that. But patterns will be different. You will always get a pattern either in a kit if you buy one, or if you're just buying loose patterns like this off the internet, or if you're buying books or leaflets, you will always have the pattern and the floss numbers. Those are two things that will always be included. Some other pattern makers or kits or books or leaflets just like to include a little bit more information. So we're going to look through this pattern together. Patterns that you buy online, you can also look at them digitally, and most of them will come in color, which can make it easier or more difficult for you depending on how you like your patterns. I personally like to print mine out, and I only have a black and white printer, so I prefer black and white patterns, but it's totally up to personal preference. If we look at this pattern, our first page tells us who made the pattern, which is Wild Violet Cross Stitch, and the title of the pattern, which is Reddit Stitch Along. Complete. This just tells me that if you're doing a stitch along, they'll usually put complete. They may put all included or some word like that. That just means that I'm getting all of these pieces, because in a stitch along, you get each piece individually. So this would have been one pattern that we received. Then gaming would have been one that we received. And we would have built it together. Okay, this just tells me that it's the entire pattern all put together. So now I'm going to go to the next page, and you can see how we will have different things in different patterns. So this one is telling us the release schedule because this was a stitch along. We got a little bit at these different dates, but this is the complete one, so we don't really need to pay attention to this. Has a link of where to download, share your progress with a hashtag, and then other places that you can find your other fellow stitchers that are working on the same thing, or that you can post your work to. Some places will include this kind of information. Go to the next page. Most pieces should include finished piece information. So this is telling us that if you stitched on 18 count Aida, which is also 36 count even weave, that it should be 126 inches wide by 107 stitches high, which would equate to 7 by 5.9 inches. Now, if you decide you want to use 14 count Aida, this information here doesn't change. The pattern size is still going to be the same. The only thing that's going to change is your finished dimensions in inches or centimeters. That's the only thing that will change. So you would get a cross stitch calculator, input that you're going to do 126 inches wide by 107 inches high. You would put 14 count or 16, whatever you're working on, and it would give you the new dimensions of what your piece would be. We're going to keep going down, and we have our legend here, and this tells us that anything that shows up in a line like this is going to be back stitching, and anything that shows up like this is going to be a French knot. Here, see, and this is where a color pattern will print funny if you only have black and white, and where it might be more useful to use it on the computer, because it says here that this symbol is going to represent a 3/4 stitch, which is very difficult for me to see because of the way I print my patterns. Cross stitch, everything else should be a cross stitch. If it's got a symbol, it's going to be a cross stitch. Now we'll go to the next page. And this is our floss number information. Okay, so our color key. So this is going to be all of your DMC numbers. So this is all the different flosses. This is the symbol that they're going to represent on the pattern. And this is how many strands you are going to use of each color. Then she also has the skein information over here. This just means that you're going to use 0.2 of a skein. You're not going to use a full skein, so it's not telling you you need to buy 2 full skeins of 156. You're not going to use that much. You're not even going to use a full skein. Okay, now here with 310, which is black, we're going to use a lot more. Almost a full skein, but still not quite. Same with down here with B5200. Okay, this is a brighter white, 310 is black. It makes sense that we would be using the majority of those 2 colors. Now most of the time, they will have all of the colors you are going to use in your color key, but sometimes they will have a specialty stitch key, which will be where we find our French knots and where we find our back stitch. And sometimes we have different color back stitches than we do cross stitches or anything else. So make sure you just double check these numbers and make sure that they're all up here as well when you're picking out your floss colors so you don't miss anything. This also tells us that we're going to do our back stitch in 2 strands. And make sure you pay attention to that because that's a little different. Typically back stitch is done in 1 strand, so make sure you pay attention to what your pattern calls for. French knot is going to be done in 1 strand, and then you can see that she has information here. Purple, used in the chart for DMC 168, which is light gray, is in the back stitch. So these are probably different colors. They're just coming out as shades of gray because, like I said, I have a black and white printer. Okay, with a piece like this that has multiple colored back stitching, it would be a lot easier for a colored copy or to just follow the pattern on your computer or on your tablet. So now we get to the pattern. So this is the entire pattern, and as you can see, this will look a little bit different than our front page because here it has all of our symbols, right? Because this is how we're going to read it to make it. Whereas if we look at it here, that's the finished product. We don't have any symbols or anything like that. It's just the thread on the Ada. So this is the part that we are going to follow. The first thing we're going to do is we need to find the middle of the fabric. Some patterns are easiest to find the middle of the fabric and work from the middle out. Some patterns are easiest to work from a corner in. It just depends what the picture is, what the pattern is, and kind of how it's designed. So for this piece, we are going to find it easiest to work in the middle. So patterns will typically, I have found a couple that don't do this, and those make it very difficult. But typically, you will find these arrows on your pattern, okay? And there will be one at the top and one at the side. Sometimes they'll also include one on the bottom and the other side. It just kind of depends. But we're going to follow these until they cross, and that will be our middle, and that is where we are going to start. So it's your choice how you want to find the middle. I tend to just get a piece of paper, and I'm going to line it up. It tells me that this is the middle row. Okay, that's lined up. And then I'm going to do another one here. This is going to be the middle square. So I'm going to place it here. Okay, and then where they cross, right where they make that right angle, that's going to be our center. And I always mark on my patterns. It's why I print them out, because I just find it easier. But I'm just going to go ahead and color that in so that you guys can see it. So you'll see that I have a little bit of blue. I'm going to bring it in. Okay. But I marked that square right there. That's my middle. So I'm going to start with that color of floss in the middle of my fabric. So we can see that our middle is this little triangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here, and we see a triangle here, but we want to also take a look and just make sure that there isn't another one, because sometimes designers use similar symbols. This is the only triangle, which tells us that the color we are going to use is going to be B5200, and we are going to stitch that right there, as well as most of it, because it's the color of the snoo. So any snoo that we have, we know is going to be that color. And that's how you translate what the pattern says, and next time we will do it onto fabric. I hope that you found this helpful on how to read your pattern and how to read the paper part and see kind of how it comes together. The next video that we'll do is getting our stuff ready to stitch, getting our supplies together, and then we're going to get everything started. We're going to start stitching, and I'm going to show you how you find the middle of your fabric so that we can start translating the pattern onto our fabric and we can end up with a fun piece.